Welcome to the Crawcast. I'm your host, George Krawczak, and this is what happened in Week 14 of the NFL season. And if you like this type of content, make sure to hit that subscribe button like it owes you money. Now let's get started. The first game is the Dallas Cowboys versus the Detroit Lions, and the Lions won 44-30. So the Lions won 44-30. The Lions' leading passer is Jared Goff, who threw for 309 yards and one touchdown. Their leading rusher is David Montgomery, who rushed for 60 yards and a touchdown. And their leading receiver is Jameson Williams, who had 96 receiving yards. For the Cowboys, their leading passer is Dak Prescott, who threw for 376 yards, one touchdown, two interceptions. Their leading rusher was Javonte Williams, who had 67 rushing yards and a touchdown. And their leading receiver was CeeDee Lamb, who had 121 receiving yards. So this game was a really close back-and-forth game initially. And then what happened is CeeDee Lamb left the game early with a concussion, and then the whole script changed. After CeeDee Lamb got injured, basically the Cowboys couldn't do anything, and they were just done. Their offense struggled, Dak struggled, George Pickens really didn't do a lot, and again, without CeeDee Lamb, it felt like their offense was really shut down. So for the Lions, you got to be happy with the win. You're still trying to make the playoffs. Brian Branch did get injured, but overall the offense is starting to look back like its old self, and it's starting to get back to normal and playing well. And then for the Cowboys, yes, the Eagles are collapsing, but the Cowboys aren't making the playoffs. Even if the Eagles collapse, I think it's almost impossible. Offense is struggling, especially without CeeDee Lamb, and then the defense isn't playing that much better. Like, overall, other than one big run by David Montgomery, the Cowboys' defense did stop the Lions' run game, but the Lions also passed all over the Cowboys. So, yeah, be really happy if you're the Lions and disappointed if you're the Cowboys. And then the injuries. They keeping up with Detroit. Detroit's defense, I still don't think is that good. Now they lose Brian Branch as well. I think it's going to be a tough road for the Lions to make the playoffs. I think they're probably not going to make it, but it's going to be really close, especially with their defense playing not as well. The next game is the Tennessee Titans versus the Cleveland Browns, and the Titans won 31-29. So the Titans won 31-29. The Titans' leading passer was Cam Ward, who threw for 117 yards, two touchdowns, and an interception. Their leading rusher is Tony Pollard, who had 161 yards and two touchdowns. And their leading receiver is Tyjae Spears, who had 28 receiving yards. For the Browns, their leading passer is Shedeur Sanders, who had 364 yards, three touchdowns, and an interception. Their leading rusher was Shedeur Sanders, who had 29 rushing yards and a touchdown. And their leading receiver was Harold Fannin Jr., who had 114 receiving yards and a touchdown. So the big story of this game is Shedeur Sanders. He played really well. So I'm going to kind of break down the analysis of Shedeur Sanders. Although I do think it's very funny how both his supporters and his haters just can't be consistent whatsoever. Like, for example, when he played against, it wasn't the 49ers, when he played his first game it was against the Raiders, where he didn't really play very well against the Raiders. And his haters were like, look, he didn't play that well. And then the people who love him are like, it doesn't matter how he played, he got the win, that's why he's really good. And then this week, it's like the people like him are like, oh, look, he played really well. And then the people who hate him are like, it doesn't matter how he played, he got the loss, and that's why he's terrible. And so I just think that's kind of funny how it feels like no one can really be honest about Shedeur Sanders. But I do have to say, all things considered, Titans, not the best team. That's correct. He did not really play the best defense here. The Titans are not a good defense. But he did play extremely well. Yes, he had a couple of bad passes, and yes, he had a horrible interception, but in the grand scheme of things, he did play really well, and I think he deserves credit for that, because this is what I said all along about Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders, where it's like, neither of them have had that bad of a game, but neither of them have had a great game. And to me, this is a great game that at least shows like a proof of concept where Shedeur can play well, and he made a lot of great tight window throws, and he at least deserves a shot for the rest of the season to be the Browns franchise guy. He might be, he might not be. I hate like crowning people too early because like look at the past 2 years. Jaden Daniels, really great rookie year. Terrible this year. Well, he's both been injured, and when he's not been injured, he's been terrible. CJ Stroud, great rookie year, and has been terrible ever since. So, like, I don't want to crown him after one game. Like, also, J.J. McCarthy, a little bit spoiler, J.J. McCarthy played really well this week. Also, has been terrible his entire career. So, like I said, I don't want to crown him after one game, but he does deserve a lot of credit. He did play extremely well, even though they lost, and he has definitely earned the right to compete for a starting job. And I do find that kind of interesting because his on the field play a little bit is the reason why he fell, but I think a lot to do with it is his personality, where, he's kind of really full of himself and he is very arrogant. And I kind of, it's funny. So I made a video that you can check out after Shedeur Sanders fell in the draft, explaining why he fell in the draft. And I compared him to Abdul Carter because Abdul Carter has acted the exact same way, where he was arrogant. He said only to like 3 or 4 teams, I'm only doing interviews with you guys because I'm going to get drafted at the top of the draft. And he went number 3 overall. And he was very arrogant. And now, if you look at Abdul Carter, he's constantly getting benched due to acting bad in meetings and in practice and his poor personality. And so I do think Shedeur Sanders does deserve credit for moving past that and kind of saying, like, look, he could have been like Abdul Carter and been kind of a bad locker room guy, a bad teammate, and he hasn't been. But also on the flip side of that, because he's a 5th-round pick, he really can't afford to be. Whereas Abdul Carter's not getting cut no matter what he's doing in meetings and in practice. Whereas Shedeur Sanders, he has a very short rope to hang himself with being a 5th-round pick. But it does seem like he has moved past his issues. And again, he played really well this week. Again, caveat, Titans, bad team, but there's at least a proof of concept there that he can play well. And also, there's a lot of controversy with the 2-point conversion. So what happened is they went for it for the 2-point conversion, which made sense. They needed to, and then they did a direct snap to Quinshon Judkins, who was supposed to hand it off for an end around, but Quinshon Judkins didn't hand the ball off and thought he could make it, and then it just ended up being a complete mess. That's the thing about trick plays. I don't hate the play call just because they're either insanely successful or they look like the dumbest thing ever. That's why every single trick play is, you'll see on the montages of most amazing plays, a lot of them are trick plays and it's like, that's genius. And then a lot of them that aren't trick play are also trick plays, are the biggest fails ever. So I didn't hate the play call. And then the Titans, at least you're building momentum with a win. That's it. Cam Ward didn't look great. Basically, Tony Pollard took over this game and won it for them. But the big talk is Shedeur Sanders, where at least there's a little bit of proof of concept that he can potentially be a capable NFL quarterback. And we'll see how he goes going forward against some real actual defenses. The next game is the Seattle Seahawks versus the Atlanta Falcons, and the Seahawks won 37-9. So the Seahawks won 37-9. The Seahawks' leading passer was Sam Darnold, who threw for 249 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. Their leading rusher was Zach Charbonnet, who rushed for 46 yards. Their leading receiver was Jackson Smith-Njigba, who had 92 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. For the Falcons, their leading passer was Kirk Cousins, who had 162 yards and 2 interceptions. Their leading rusher was Bijan Robinson, who had 86 rushing yards. And their leading receiver was Kyle Pitts, who had 90 receiving yards. This game was close for a while, but ultimately, the Seahawks are just a better team. They should have won this. They should have dominated. The Falcons aren't very good, and especially if Kirk Cousins, they're not very good. Kirk Cousins has been a very big disappointment. I thought, personally, he'd be one of the best backup quarterbacks in the league, but he's just not good anymore. Can't really do it. And the Seahawks dominated. They need to. They're fighting for the 1 seed. A good team beat a terrible team, so that's exactly what happened here, and that's kind of what needed to happen. The next game is the Indianapolis Colts versus the Jacksonville Jaguars, and the Jaguars won 36-19. So the Jaguars won 36-19. The Jaguars' leading passer was Trevor Lawrence, who threw for 244 yards and 2 touchdowns. Their leading rusher was Travis Etienne, who had 74 rushing yards, and their leading receiver was Brian Thomas Jr., who had 87 receiving yards. For the Colts, their leading passer was Riley Leonard, who threw for 145 yards and an interception. Their leading rusher was Jonathan Taylor, who had 74 rushing yards and a touchdown. And their leading receiver was Alec Pierce, who had 80 receiving yards. So in this game, it was a disaster for Indianapolis. And it's quite shocking how much the league can change in 2 weeks. 2 weeks ago, Indianapolis were the number 1 team in the NFL. And now they're losing games. They lost the last 3, even though they should have beaten the Chiefs 3 weeks ago. They lost their starting quarterback, Daniel Jones. He tore his Achilles. And now they're quarterbackless because Anthony Richardson is still on injury reserve because he fractured his orbital bone with a stretching band, which, again, I don't even know how that's possible, but he did. And it's being reported that he's not going to return for the rest of the season. So they went from best team in the NFL going all in to now being quarterbackless, might miss the playoffs, and can't do anything. So I heard that right now it's being reported that they might try to bring Philip Rivers out of retirement. I don't think Philip Rivers really helps you. Like, Riley Leonard didn't look good, and he's a sixth-round pick. Like, the only idea that I can come up with if quarterbacks available, because there's no one left in free agency. I don't know if this is possible, and I don't know how it works with, like, collusion and all that, but Russell Wilson is the New York Giants' third-string quarterback. He's been inactive for the past several games. I can think maybe he might go to the Giants and say, hey, since I've been inactive every single game and I'm a third-string quarterback, can you cut me? And then have him sign with the Colts and take over the team. Because they've gone all in this year. They cannot afford to not have a quarterback and miss the playoffs. Like, I'm not saying Russell Wilson's a great option. Like, obviously he's played himself to a backup slash third-string role, but he's got to be better than Philip Rivers, who hasn't played in 5 years, and then Riley Leonard, who's a sixth-round pick and didn't look good. Just the Colts are in such a mess right now. And this kind of reminds me about the Jets, where this is the problem I had with the Jets 2 years ago, is they went all in on the 2022 season. They gave up everything to make a great team, and Aaron Rodgers as their starting quarterback. 4 plays in, Aaron Rodgers tore his Achilles, and then the Jets had Zach Wilson for the rest of the year, and their defense was good, but their offense couldn't do anything with Zach Wilson. Then, the following year, and now, they could not, like, rebuild and go back to their status because they went all in that 1 year. And that's what set them up for failure, even with Rodgers coming back, is because they're like, we went all in, and now you can't afford to go all in another year. And that's what concerns me about the Colts, is like, they went all in on this year. This year was supposed to be their year, kind of no excuses. And now it's like, you can't really repeat it next year because of you're losing the draft picks, you're going to lose some players, and players are getting older. I don't know what Daniel Jones does because he tore his Achilles, and we're at the end of the season, so he probably will miss like maybe a couple of weeks into next year. Do you give him a contract? Because yes, he's been injured, but also like he's started to suck recently. But I don't know if the Colts have any better options at QB out there. This is just a disaster for the Colts. Like I said, they went from going all in to no one knows what's going on with them. I would try to get Russell Wilson because, like I said, I just can't imagine Philip Rivers, 44 years old, not playing in the NFL for 5 years, and his final season, he didn't play that great, have some sort of magical turnaround and comes back and is able to lead the Colts. Maybe he can, but I think Russell Wilson's probably their best bet right now. That's the only thing that comes to my mind. And then the Jaguars. They played extremely, extremely well. And I'm turning my mind on the Jaguars. I've always been the biggest Jaguars critic because I thought they're winning more games they deserve and they are not on par with a lot of other teams. But they've played really well this game, and Trevor Lawrence has looked great. Brian Thomas looked great. Their defense looked great. And I think the Jaguars might be legit. I don't think they're Super Bowl contenders, but I think they might be legit playoff contenders. And, watch this. Oh, my big Jaguars turn around. Trevor Lawrence suck next week. But I'm starting to change my mind that the Jaguars could be legit in an actual team and not kind of the frauds I've been painting them as almost every single week. But so good for the Jaguars. They win. And the Colts, man, it's just an absolute disaster. And I feel so bad for them because no one expected them to be this good. I said they were going to be good because I'm like, they had a good team last year and Anthony Richardson was their quarterback. So as long as Daniel Jones plays better than him, they should be way better. But it's just, they have no quarterback. And without a quarterback, you can't really win. And so I don't know what the Colts are going to do. The next game is the Washington Commanders versus the Minnesota Vikings, and the Vikings won 31-0. So the Vikings won 31-0. The Vikings' leading passer is J.J. McCarthy, who threw for 163 yards and 3 touchdowns. Their leading rusher is Aaron Jones, who rushed for 76 yards. And their leading receiver is Jordan Addison, who had 62 receiving yards. For the Commanders, their leading passer is Jaden Daniels, who had 78 passing yards and an interception. Their leading rusher is Chris Rodriguez, who had 52 rushing yards. And their leading receiver is Terry McLaurin, who had 41 receiving yards. Man, this is shocking because of how these two teams performed last week, where last week the Vikings scored 0 points and got completely blown out. And then last week the Commanders went to overtime with the Broncos and nearly beat the Broncos. So how do you go from, these two teams where the Commanders looked good against the Broncos, who are one of the top teams, and the Vikings scored 0 to now the Vikings blowing them out. So this is all I gotta say is J.J. McCarthy, he looked really good, and this is what they needed from him, is J.J. McCarthy just to effectively not blow it. The Vikings' defense is good. Their offense is good. They have good running backs. They have a good offensive line. They have good receivers. They just need J.J. McCarthy to stop throwing the interceptions, to stop making the stupid throws, and just basically play well enough to not blow it and let the team carry him. And that's what he did this game. He played well enough to not blow it. And that's been better than most games because they've been in almost every single game they've played. And the issue is that they just haven't been able to put it all together because J.J. McCarthy's been letting them down. Yes, it's against Commander's defense, who is not very good, but he does deserve a lot of credit. And then the Commanders. I think there's a conversation about Jayden Daniels because yes, he is getting injured, but he's really hasn't had a good game this year. He's been terrible even when he's fully healthy. He did get injured again, and it's just Jayden Daniels feels like a disaster right now. I don't know what more to just say. Like maybe he can turn it around next year, but he's kind of reminding me of the C.J. Stroud route, where C.J. Stroud great rookie year and then absolutely terrible after that. And Jayden Daniels is looking very very much like that as well. Like again, he has not had a good game this year, even when he's been healthy. So you gotta be happy with the Vikings. Maybe you can build momentum, and J.J. McCarthy can be the guy. But the Commanders, more of a disaster. Jayden Daniels doesn't look good. The team doesn't look good. Just a complete and utter disaster. The next game is the Cincinnati Bengals versus the Buffalo Bills, and the Bills won 39 to 34. So the Bills won 39 to 34. The Bills' leading passer is Josh Allen, who threw for 251 yards and 3 touchdowns. Their leading rusher is James Cook, who had 80 rushing yards, and their leading receiver is Dawson Knox, who had 93 receiving yards. For the Bengals, their leading passer is Joe Burrow, who threw for 284 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Their leading rusher is Samaje Perine, who had 31 rushing yards, and their leading receiver is T. Higgins, who had 92 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. So this is a really good back and forth game because these are two really great quarterbacks. It felt like Josh Allen kind of put his Superman cape on and solely carried the team to a win. James Cook unfortunately had a fumble, and he really had 2 fumbles, but one really didn't count. So James Cook needs to hold on to the ball better. And then the Bengals, this starting to remind me of their Super Bowl run, or even last year, where Joe Burrow is a very good quarterback, and this offense should be good enough to make a playoff run. But unfortunately, their defense is so historically bad, they just can't do it. And so I don't know what a quick and easy fix is because they spent all this money for the offense. They paid Joe Burrow a lot, paid Jamar Chase a lot, paid T. Higgins a lot. And so where does that money come from? The money comes from the defense. And so overall, this Bengals team is it feels like a disaster because their offense is so good, but their defense just can't do it. And then the Bills, they're looking good. Their defense didn't look great. They had an amazing interception. It was a terrible interception on Joe Burrow, but they had a really good interception on the Bills defense. And Josh Allen, when he plays like this, he's unstoppable. So maybe he can. I think the division is probably out of their hands. I think the Patriots kind of have that locked up more or less. But if they're going to make a playoff run, they certainly can. And I think the Bills are gearing up to do that and play well. The next game is the New Orleans Saints versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and the Saints won 24 to 20. So the Saints won 24 to 20. The Saints' leading passer was Tyler Shough, who had 144 yards and an interception. Their leading rusher was Devin Neal, who had 70 rushing yards and a touchdown. And their leading receiver was Devon Vele, who had 40 receiving yards. For the Buccaneers, their leading passer is Baker Mayfield, who had 122 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Their leading rusher is Bucky Irvin, who had 55 rushing yards. And their leading receiver is Chris Godwin, who had 55 receiving yards. So in this game, the Buccaneers were ahead early, and then the Saints made an incredible comeback. Yes, Tyler Shough deserves credit for playing extremely, extremely well in the fourth quarter, but overall, he didn't really play that well in the game, and I just don't think Tyler Shough has really proven enough to be the Saints franchise guy. Yes, he's had decent games, but I think Kellen Moore's just kind of the quarterback whisperer. Wherever he goes, he gets the best out of all his quarterbacks. So overall, the Saints, I think you're kind of disappointed because you want to draft your quarterback of the future at the top of the draft and you won. And then the Buccaneers, I cannot believe the collapse of the Buccaneers. They've been terrible lately. Baker Mayfield really hasn't been playing well. And it's weird because everyone was injured on the Buccaneers. And it was like, wow, Baker Mayfield is carrying this team with nobody on it. And then all of a sudden, now everyone's coming back and being healthy. It's like Baker Mayfield's playing terrible and the Buccaneers just can't win. Like, I don't know how that happens, where you're getting better as a team and then you're losing more. But this has got to be worried because I just don't think the Panthers can make it. Like, Bryce Young is throwing 100 yards a game. I just don't think he deserves to be in the playoffs, and I don't think this Panthers team's good enough to be in the playoffs, and I don't think the Buccaneers should lose to them, but they play each other twice in the next 3 weeks, so we'll see how that ends. But I think the Buccaneers still make the playoffs just because I don't believe in Carolina really at all. But man, this is just a complete and utter collapse of the Buccaneers. It's absolutely terrible, and I don't know what the solution is. So they just got to play better, and Baker Mayfield needs to play better. The next game is the Pittsburgh Steelers versus the Baltimore Ravens, and the Steelers won 27-22. So the Steelers won 27-22. The Steelers' leading passer was Aaron Rodgers, who threw for 284 yards and a touchdown. Their leading rusher is Kenneth Gainwell, who rushed for 15 yards and a touchdown. And their leading receiver is DK Metcalf, who had 148 yards. For the Ravens, their leading passer is Lamar Jackson, who threw for 219 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. Their leading rusher is Derrick Henry, who had 94 rushing yards. Their leading receiver is Zay Flowers, who had 121 receiving yards. So in this game, the Steelers looked really good. We all heard all week after last week's disastrous game that the Steelers' offense has been practicing differently, and it showed. Aaron Rodgers played extremely, extremely well. DK Metcalf played great. Just this whole Steelers offense operation played well in the pass game. Run game, not existent. Did not do anything on the ground. And then the Ravens. Their offense struggled quite a bit. Lamar Jackson really did not play that well. There was a controversial call at the end. So this is what happened is, I believe it was Isaiah Likely. He was in the end zone, and he kind of caught the ball. He took 1 step, 2 step, and then the ball was hit out of his hands. And people are debating should that be a touchdown because he kind of caught the ball, got 2 feet down, or should that not have been a touchdown because they ruled not touchdown because he didn't make a football move after kind of catching the ball because the ball got hit out of his hands. I'll be honest, I really see it both ways because in one sense of the word is he did catch it and get 2 feet down, but also in another sense of the word where he caught it, got 2 feet down, and the ball was immediately knocked out of his hands. And so if that wasn't in the end zone and that was just a normal play, it would have been an incomplete pass because it got knocked down out of his hands immediately. I feel like I can literally show you like 100 examples of that happening and it being called a touchdown, and then I feel like I can show you 100 examples of that happening and that being called an incomplete pass. It's just a really fine line between when does the ball transition from touching your hands to becoming a catch. And that's just a really, really tough one. And so I'm going to be honest, I think the refs probably made the right call, but it's just really, really tough. And then at the end, the Steelers defense just wrapped it up and played well. The Ravens were going through a 2-minute drill to try to win the game, and they just completely blew it. Like, Lamar kept getting sacked, and then there was bad clock management where they wasted like almost a full minute to do one play for 2 yards. And the Lamar Jackson and the Ravens have just been struggling a lot, and I think the Steelers probably win the division. I think that's most likely. And it's also funny because it feels like history always repeats itself. Because look at the Steelers. This is what happens. Every single year, they start off really well, have a midseason collapse, limp into the playoffs, and then get eliminated in the first round of the wild card. And now they start off hot, midseason collapse, and now they're limping their way into the playoffs. But overall, this Ravens team just feels like a disaster. The offense isn't firing much. And then the Steelers. They can be dangerous if they start playing well. I still think their defense needs to play better, but if their offense can play great, they can be a dangerous team, although I think it's very unlikely. The next game is the Miami Dolphins versus the New York Jets, and the Dolphins won 34-10. So the Dolphins won 34-10. The Dolphins' leading passer was Tua, who threw for 127 yards and a touchdown. Their leading rusher was Jalen Wright, who had 107 yards and a touchdown. And their leading receiver was Jalen Waddle, who had 50 receiving yards and a touchdown. For the Jets, their leading passer was Brady Cook, who threw for 163 yards and 2 interceptions. Their leading rusher was Breece Hall, who had 43 rushing yards, and their leading receiver was Malik Taylor, who had 51 receiving yards. This game, the Dolphins just dominated, but also the Dolphins are a good team and the Jets are terrible, so it kind of makes sense. Let me rephrase that. The Dolphins are an average team and the Jets are terrible. The Dolphins are not very good, but the Dolphins completely shut down the Jets. Their run game played extremely well. It felt like Devon Achane really took over this game and played amazing. And it's interesting because Tua and Mike McDaniel feel like they're in the same boat in the sense where they're both playing well enough to the point where you can say, should Tua get cut and should Mike McDaniel get fired? Probably not. But then they're also not playing too well and coaching well enough where you say, oh, for sure, 100% they need to keep their jobs. It's just tough. If I had to take a guess, I say Mike McDaniel probably keeps his job just because of the turnaround of the Dolphins, but I don't know. But the Dolphins are a better team than the Jets, and the Jets are just a disaster. So we'll see how it goes. But the Jets are probably happy with a loss because you want your picks to be as best as possible to completely rebuild the team, and they're blowing everything up and rebuilding. The next game is the Denver Broncos versus the Las Vegas Raiders, and the Broncos won 24-17. So the Broncos won 24-17. The Broncos' leading passer is Bo Nix, who threw for 212 yards. Their leading rusher is R.J. Harvey, who had 75 rushing yards and a touchdown. And their leading receiver is Courtland Sutton, who had 62 receiving yards. For the Raiders, their leading passer is Geno Smith, who threw for 116 yards and a touchdown. Their leading rusher is Ashton Jeanty, who had 30 rushing yards. And their leading receiver was Jack Beck, who had 50 receiving yards. So I don't know what to say about this game. The Broncos are good. The Raiders are a complete dumpster fire. This game really shouldn't have been this close. So at the end, this is what happened. There's a lot of controversy because there was an 8-point spread, or I believe a 7.5-point spread. And what happened was the Raiders, at the end, they kicked a field goal with 6 seconds left, and then went for an onside kick with 3 seconds left, and then the game was over. And because the Raiders kicked the field goal, then a lot of people got screwed on their bets because they met the 7.5-point underdog favorite. And I actually agree with the Raiders, and I don't think there was any sort of rigging or anything like people are suggesting. I think they actually lost money, but I like a team that fights to the very end. I get it. Kicking a field goal and then getting an onside kick with 1 second is 0.00001% chance of winning. But I want a team to fight till the very end. I want a team that throws Hail Marys to the end. I don't care if you're down 20-0 with 2 minutes left. We've seen crazier things happen in NFL history. I don't want a team to give up and just quit fighting just because it's there's a small chance. Well, there's such a small chance we'll win. Why even try? Especially if a terrible team like the Raiders, I want a team to fight till the very end. So I'm happy the Raiders did it. I think that was a good decision because I think it's terrible that a team just quits and gives up. And then the Broncos, they got to win, which is very important. Bo Nix, he's playing well enough to not blow it, but really not doing anything spectacular. And this game probably shouldn't have been this close, but overall, the Broncos are a way better team than the Raiders, and this is the outcome that should have happened. The next game is the Los Angeles Rams versus the Arizona Cardinals, and the Rams won 45-17. So the Rams won 45-17. The Rams' leading passer is Matthew Stafford, who threw for 281 yards and 3 touchdowns. Their leading rusher is Blake Corum, who had 128 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. And their leading receiver is Puka Nacua, who had 167 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. For the Cardinals, their leading passer is Jacoby Brissett, who threw for 271 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Their leading rusher was Jacoby Brissett, who had 22 rushing yards. And their leading receiver is Michael Wilson, who had 142 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. So the Rams are back. And this is what I said is that Matthew Stafford had a complete collapse against the Panthers last week. And I thought that was just a one-off because Matthew Stafford has been playing really good, and he is the definitive MVP of the NFL. This is crazy to me. Right now, Matthew Stafford is number 1 in passing touchdowns with 35. The second closest is a tie between Dak Prescott and Jared Goff, who both have 26. So that is a 9 touchdown difference between number 1 and number 2. Matthew Stafford has been elite this season. He is the best quarterback in the NFL, and these Rams are hard to stop. They're amazing. That's why it's so tough, because when I'm looking at the defenses, for a team to beat the Rams, they need to have an amazing defense that can shut down this Rams offense. And when I look at the NFC playoff picture, only two teams really come to mind. It's the Packers and the Seahawks. Like, it feels like those are the only two teams that even remotely have the defense that can potentially shut down this Rams offense and make Matthew Stafford cave and play terrible. And so this is going to be a really tough NFC. Like, the Rams offense is really great. Their defense is really great. The Seahawks, it felt like their defense has been good and their offense has been great. And then the Packers, their defense has been fantastic and their offense has been a little inconsistent, but overall really good. So it's going to be a tough battle between those three. And everyone else, I really find it hard to believe that they're making the Super Bowl. And then the Cardinals, they're just a disaster. Jacoby Brissett's not it. Their defense is terrible. Rich Gannon was pretty good last year, all things considered. And then this year, he's just been terrible. So maybe they need to get rid of him. I don't know. Just overall, this Cardinals team is terrible, and this Rams team is really good. And it's going to be tough who stops them, because the Rams, Matthew Stafford's playing out of his mind, and the defense is playing really well as well. The next game is the Green Bay Packers versus the Chicago Bears, and the Packers won 28-21. So the Packers won 28-21. The Packers' leading passer was Jordan Love, who threw for 234 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. Their leading rusher was Josh Jacobs, who rushed for 86 yards and a touchdown. And their leading receiver was Christian Watson, who had 89 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. For the Bears, their leading passer is Caleb Williams, who had 186 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Their leading rusher is Devondre Swift, who had 63 rushing yards. And their leading receiver was Luther Burden, who had 67 receiving yards. So this game was really back and forth. The Packers dominated for most of the game, but Caleb Williams made a lot of really good clutch throws. Like, he's kind of reminding me of J.J. McCarthy a little bit in terms of, or even a Tim Tebow, you say, where Caleb Williams, all the most insane, impressive, and possible throws, like rolling out and throwing it perfectly, he's making those on a crazy consistent basis. But the problem is, it's the easy throws. Like, if a guy's wide open 5 yards down field, Caleb Williams will miss him by a mile. So he just needs to be more consistent. I don't think the Bears are as good as their record is, but I think it's good that they're showing proof that Ben Johnson can be a good head coach. And Caleb Williams is making the hard throws. He just has to be more consistent on the easy ones. So what happened is, on the final play of the game, Caleb Williams was rolling out to his left. He had 3 options. He could have rolled out for it was 4th down and 1. He could have continued running, get the first down, maybe a touchdown, but probably not the touchdown, but he could have gotten the first down, lived to play another down. He could have thrown it to DJ Moore, who was wide open for a touchdown. And then he also threw it to, I can't remember who it was, I think it might have been Cole Kmet, who was also wide open for a touchdown. But the problem is, he made the one thing he couldn't do. Cole Kmet was wide open, so if Caleb Williams would have fired it in there, they would have caught the touchdown. And then who knows what would have happened on the 2-point conversion, but he kind of just lofts it up, and then it's easily intercepted by Keyshawn Nixon. He literally did the one thing he couldn't do, whereas if you have run, success. If you have thrown to DJ Moore, success. If you have kind of did a bullet pass to Cole Kmet, it would have been successful. But he kind of lobbed it up, and it was intercepted. It was a terrible play. Jordan Love played really, really fantastic. He had one terrible interception at the beginning, but after that, we're in Toyota-thon season of Jordan Love. The Packers' defense played well too, except for at the end. What happened is, the Packers, they scored, they had 1 3 and out and basically 2 2-play touchdowns, where the defense was not getting any rest whatsoever, because the Packers are either punting immediately or scoring immediately. And so once your defense is on the field for way too long, it starts to collapse and not really do too well. But overall, really impressive game by the Packers. They're first in the division, and I think they probably have the highest odds to win the division, because the Bears, I don't think, are that great. Their defense isn't that good. And then Caleb Williams, there are just a couple of throws where he did really good. And then the refs. There was a lot of weird calls, where there was one where Cole Kmet caught the ball and then it was stripped from him and it was in Evan Williams' hands. So either one of two things happened. Either he stripped the ball and it was an interception, or he stripped the ball and it was a fumble. At no point did it not go from Cole Kmet's hands to Evan Williams' hands. So it should have been either a fumble or an interception for the Packers. But then the refs ruled it an incomplete pass, which makes no sense. That was very, very weird. And then another call was Luther Burden went up to Keyshawn Nixon and was like grabbed his neck and was actually choking him, and Keyshawn Nixon swatted his hand away. 15-yard penalty on Keyshawn Nixon. I get it. A lot of the times the retaliation is the one that gets penalized, but that was just bad to me because it's like, someone's choking your neck. What are you supposed to do? And then the final one is Micah Parsons. He keeps getting held every single play. They're literally bear hugging him, and there's no penalties against him. So I think there's a lot of badly officiated games this weekend, but overall, the Packers, you got to be happy. And then the Bears, like, I get it. Disappointing you lost, but you got to be happy to make it this far. No one expected them to be in this much of a playoff contention and this much for the division. And so, they're making it close. I don't think they're that great of a team, but overall, Bears got to be happy they made it this far. The next game is the Houston Texans versus the Kansas City Chiefs, and the Texans won 20-10. So the Texans won 20-10. The Texans' leading passer was C.J. Stroud, who threw for 230 yards and a touchdown. Their leading rusher was Woody Marks, who had 68 rushing yards, and their leading receiver was Nico Collins, who had 4 receptions for 121 yards. For the Chiefs, their leading passer was Patrick Mahomes, who threw for 160 yards and 3 interceptions. Their leading rusher was Patrick Mahomes, who had 59 rushing yards, and their leading receiver was Xavier Worthy, who had 55 receiving yards. So in this game, the Chiefs just played bad. Like, their offense played absolutely horrible. And this Texans defense is elite. So in the first half, C.J. Stroud and this Texans offense couldn't do anything. Like, C.J. Stroud looked lost. He played terrible. And then towards the end, he actually started to play decently well. And then this Chiefs team, man, they had a lot of drops. Patrick Mahomes played horrible. This whole team just played horrible, except for their defense. Their defense did play well, but I think that's more of the Texans being a terrible offense. So that's kind of to say that the Chiefs are probably eliminated from the playoffs. I refuse to accept the fact that they keep getting eliminated, but I think they are. I think it's basically done now. And this Texans defense is legit, is an elite defense in the NFL. It kind of reminds me of the 2015 Broncos, where Peyton Manning was like the worst quarterback in the NFL, but the Broncos defense played amazing and carried him to a Super Bowl, and he basically just didn't blow it in the playoffs. So if CJ Stroud can play mildly better and basically just not blow it for the Texans, this team could be dangerous and scary with their defense. But overall, the Texans are back looking to make the playoffs, and then the Chiefs, just more disaster, more terribleness, and I think the Chiefs are probably done. The next game is the Philadelphia Eagles versus the Los Angeles Chargers, and the Chargers won 22-19. So the Chargers won 22-19. The Chargers' leading passer is Justin Herbert, who threw for 139 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Their leading rusher is Justin Herbert, who had 66 rushing yards, and their leading receiver was Keami Vidal, who had 60 receiving yards. For the Eagles, their leading passer is Jalen Hurts, who threw for 240 yards and 4 interceptions. Their leading rusher is Saquon Barkley, who had 122 yards and a touchdown. Their leading receiver was A.J. Brown, who had 100 yards. Both these teams played absolutely terrible. Jalen Hurts played horrible, had 4 interceptions, and it was really funny because one of them where he threw it to, I believe, Khalil Mack, and it got intercepted, and then Eagles player, I think it might have been Dallas Goedert, hit it out of Khalil Mack's hand, and Khalil Mack fumbled the ball. Then Jalen Hurts picked it up, started running, and then Jalen Hurts fumbled the ball, so Jalen Hurts threw an interception and fumbled on the exact same play. A.J. Brown played terrible. He dropped a lot of passes. Even though he had some good ones, he dropped a lot. And then Justin Herbert played terrible, but it's tough because this Chargers offensive line is so injured that I just can't see the Chargers going far. Justin Herbert's doing what he can, but everyone's so beat up that the Chargers offense literally can't do anything because he gets pressured every single second and every single play. I think this Chargers team is really in trouble. I think their defense has been showing up recently, but their offense can't do anything because their offensive line is so terrible. The Eagles' collapse does continue. It was funny because, so they had an Easter rabbit, like a blow-up Easter rabbit in the Eagles practice facility, and they call it the Positivity Rabbit. And I'm just like, okay, so instead of like practicing more or doing more in the film room, how you're going to turn your season around and stop the collapse, the Positivity blow-up doll, I just found that funny. Because I guess unfortunately the Positivity Rabbit did not work. But overall, just the Charger, I think both these teams are in trouble. I think both these teams have a shot at being one and done in the playoffs. Luckily for the Eagles, even though they're collapsing, they basically have the division locked up and they'll win it kind of no matter what. But the Chargers, man, I'm nervous about them. I don't think they can sustain this with their offensive line playing the way it is. So that's what happened in Week 14 of the NFL season. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Which teams you like, which teams you didn't, what players you like, what players you didn't. And if you like this type of content, make sure to hit that subscribe button like it owes you money, and I'll see you on the next one.